Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new director and trustee and friend legislative training session hosted by the Massachusetts Legislative Committee. My name is Maura Dede, she, hers. I am a library advisory specialist at the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, but I also work with the Legislative Committee. So this is a very informal call today, kind of an overview for our new library directors and people who are new to Massachusetts library advocacy or looking to a refresher. So we're going to kind of give an overview of what's coming up in this legislative season and some tips and ideas to help it make it as successful as possible. So we are joined by a few folks on this call today. We're going to have a welcome from Michelle Fialo, our president of the Massachusetts Library Association, and I'll be sharing some information as well. And then we're also joined by Commissioner Debbie Conrad of the chair of the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, who will talk about our legislative agenda. And shout out to Will Adamczak, who is one of the co-chairs of the Massachusetts Library Association Legislative Committee, who'll be running chat and all things tech. So please feel free to use chat, ask questions. We want to make this as informative and engaging as possible. So Michelle is going to give us a brief introduction and welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm just seeing in the chat. I'm so sorry about the flooding, Massachusetts. Anyway, welcome to our legislative breakfast training session. I am Michelle Filio. I am the president of the Massachusetts Library Association. I want to give a big shout out to the MLA Legislative Committee, particularly the co-chairs, putting together this session, along with Maura Dede and Debbie Conrad from the MBLC. First of all, I just want to say, if you are not a member of the Massachusetts Library Association, please join us. And if you are a member, consider seeking out a committee to join. We have a whole variety of committees that are looking for people, and they might just fit your interest. We have the conference committee, the legislative committee, the intellectual freedom and social responsibility committee. We have paras, a whole variety of committees for people to join. We also encourage you to have your staff join MLA. From para-librarians to your seasoned professional librarians, all can benefit from becoming MLA members. And what is MLA? It's a membership organization for library workers across the Commonwealth. We offer opportunities for colleagues to work on topics of professional development, dealing with book challenges, and state and federal legislation that supports all libraries and access to information. We just recently became partners with the Sustainable Library Initiative, and MLA members can take advantage of SLI webinars and get a discount on becoming a full SLI member. Today, we are talking about how to advocate for your library, and specifically how to advocate to your state legislators about increasing support and funding at the statewide level. Here are some tips from the Legislative Committee. Make contact with your legislators. Invite your senator and representative to your libraries for events. Invite them to a Board of Trustee meeting. Invite them to host their coffee hour or their office hours at the library, and invite them for coffee. You want to get FaceTime with them. Keep that contact fresh, call them every so often, and make an appointment. Keep them informed of budget needs and concerns. Ask them if you can do anything for them. For those of you who live in a different community than where you work, it's extremely effective to meet with those legislators as well. And encourage your trustees, friends, and foundation to do the same. Make connections with other community organizations that are not library specific. Consider reaching out to your local sports booster club or the PTO in your area. You never know where you'll find a connection. And finally, our legislators are truly appreciate meeting and speaking with you. Not only are you their constituents, but they are very nice people, and they will love to see their efforts going to a great cause, which are libraries. And now I'm going to turn it over to Debbie or Maura. I'm not sure.
Back to me. Thank you, Michelle. yes, Michelle is our wonderful MLA president. And if you have any questions about MLA and joining a committee or thinking about the right spot for you in MLA, there is the right spot for you in MLA. Maybe there's more than one spot. She'll be happy to chat with you, as well as Will or anyone else on the executive board at the Massachusetts Library Association. So for folks who are new to getting involved in advocacy, new to Massachusetts, or looking for a refresher, I wanted to just kind of share some acronyms and logos because we use those a lot, and it's just important to know who it is we're talking about. And they all start with M and probably have an L in them. So there's the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. This is our state library agency that has the statutory authority to improve and advocate for library services throughout the Commonwealth. So this legislative agenda season is connected to our budget request to the legislature. We're funded, we receive our money from the legislature, and this funding helps support statewide library programs. Some of that funding goes towards the Massachusetts Library System, a nonprofit member-based organization that does receive some state funding that provides a lot of the continuing ed services to our libraries, consulting work, and delivery. And then there's also the Massachusetts Center for the Book, which is one of the legislative priorities this year. This is again a nonprofit 501c3 state sponsored that promotes literature and reading through events throughout the state. And they have a new director. Maybe it's I think still within a year, Courtney Andrea, who's been doing some wonderful work. And so we're highlighting their needs in this legislative season, which Commissioner Debbie Conrad will get into. And then there's two membership-based organizations, the Massachusetts School Library Association for school librarians, folks that work in that environment, and then the Massachusetts Library Association, which generally has our public libraries and academic libraries. Okay, so just so for folks who I thought maybe I would just share a little bit of information about myself and kind of like help ground today's call-in, especially for new folks. So I was thinking about myself when like throughout my career in Massachusetts, and about 10, I've been working in the state since 2011, and I had an opportunity to be a part of NELS, the Leadership Institute, in 2013. And Kristen McLeod did a presentation at that about the importance of advocacy and building relationships with your elected officials. And it made me like nervous. Like, I can't do that. That sounds like that's work for other people. And because I knew that kind of that fear and that nervousness was something I needed to lean into and turn towards, because I knew innately how critical that relationship is in terms of being able to build support for our public libraries, telling our stories and what our needs are for public libraries. So maybe you might be feeling the same way. And I wanted to say that that's normal. And I still feel that way sometimes. But the goal of today's call is to help build your confidence, and that we know that speaking can feel intimidating, but legislators are just people like us, and they're often in office to help make a difference, and they care about public services like libraries. And in Massachusetts, we've had really successful advocacy over the past few years and have benefited from high revenues as well throughout the state. A lot of that success in the MBLC budget is due to in part to advocacy from directors, friends, trustees, people talking to their legislators about the importance of library funding. And so we don't want to rest on our past successes and really want to continue to that advocacy for the highest levels possible of funding, especially if revenues might be looking a little bit different in the upcoming fiscal years. So this language up here I borrowed from the American Library Association of just talking about how advocacy is really important to achieving that library mission. So it is really done at all levels. So today we're really focusing on the state level and how delivering the right information, a compelling story, can really make a big difference. And it's also about building that relationship over time. So when it comes to time to make an ask, there's been trust and collaboration established. So you might be hearing, like, what is a legislative breakfast? Why do libraries host them? Why should I care? So they are informal gatherings held at local libraries with the elected officials of those districts to discuss library advocacy and the impact on state funding for local libraries. And these have been a part of the state level advocacy cycle for some time, and they're an effective means of communicating with legislators. I like to think that there's like a home field advantage to legislative breakfast because it's in a library. It's an environment that is comfortable to us. It's familiar to us. We are the library experts, and we need to share what that expertise with our legislators. You'll probably hear this many times, but for good reason. So one of our commissioners, Marianne Kluggish, always says, if they're not hearing from you, legislators aren't hearing from you, they're gonna assume everything's okay. So we want to share with them what our needs are, what our concerns are. Um, on like a practicality thing, they often have a light breakfast and coffee. Think about a nice continental spread, some coffee, some orange juice, maybe some tea. And there'll often be a presentation or two, a welcome from the library director, somebody from a commissioner or staff from the Massachusetts, from MBLC, maybe MLS. Sometimes they might even feature a patron from that community talking about the impact of the library. And it's also an opportunity for like casual, informal networking as well. And you can find that full list on the MLA website, masslib.org. And I think will definitely put that in the chat as well. Um, so why should you attend? This is because we're the experts on libraries, and this is an opportunity to talk about how state aid brings funding to your library for projects. What do you use that for? For maybe it's for programming or databases, or it was used for capital expenses or a renovation. You're the expert on the impact of that funding at your local library, and the best person to tell that story to your elected officials. We are the experts to talk about intellectual freedom and the challenges our libraries are facing, from formal challenges to harassment of library staff, and also the celebration of finding books that reflect our community. And we hear stories all the time about what it means for somebody to find a book in the collection that can impact them and save their life or help them see who they are. And those are really important stories to tell to our legislators as well. The impact on ebook pricing on limited library budgets. I remember attending a Minuteman presentation a few years ago and just hearing about the percentage of the total ebook budget that was used for fulfilling holds, which means we're not being able to do collection development and provide maybe expand our ebooks into other languages or other topics because of the pricing structure. So we are the experts on how these things are impacting our libraries. And it's important to share that information to our legislators. And quite frankly, we all think that building a relationship with your elected officials is important, and it is part of our responsibility of a library director and for your board of trustees as well. This is, it's an ongoing relationship, and it's a skill set that you're also building as a library director. If you maybe move to another library, or you're not yet a library director, or someone in a leadership role looking to build that skill set for you later on, you're building that skill set for yourself. And it also flexes that muscle in the event that you elected officials turn over, right? They're elected by the people, and oftentimes there's new folks. So you're already putting into practice establishing that relationship with your elected officials. Okay, what do we have next? So who should attend? Basically, you. If you're here on this call, you should attend. We're thinking about library directors, your trustee chair or vice chair, maybe friends or foundation leadership, important library advocates and fundraisers for library initiatives, and can also be a powerful voice in the advocacy network. library staff and leadership roles, an assistant director or head of children's services, somebody who may be able to speak to some of the challenges and opportunities that state funding provides for that library. It's also a nice idea, especially if you're the host library, to invite your town manager or your mayor, your town administrator, maybe the library liaison to the select board as well, to help show that there's that support for the library at the local level. These folks know how important local aid funding is for municipalities, and can help show that there is support for the library at the local level. All right, so what should I know beforehand? So I think one of the things that you should know beforehand is that it's informal. It's about like an hour and a half. And that includes like all the speakers, the eating, the chit chat, the networking. You'll hear, oftentimes there'll be those speakers. So there'll also be handouts from MBLC with the legislative handouts. So you've decided to attend, great. You understand that these are critical to maintain an adequate level of funding, and we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable talking with their legislators. So important to prepare a few talking points about the impact of state aid or funding to networks has for your local library and why it's critical, that funding is critical to library operations. You should also know that sometimes maybe the chief of staff or a legislative aide is going to attend the breakfast instead of the legislator, and that's okay. These are people who are important for like the operations of that representative's or senator's office, and also important to build a relationship with those folks. In the past, when I've attended legislative days, and made appointments, we often spoke with the chief of staff. Maybe the legislator had a conflict, we couldn't meet with them, but these are important people who are helping digest and make sense of all the information that they're receiving. So it's okay, and important to communicate just the same messages with them and answer their questions. And it's important to do your homework. So I think learning about your legislators is important. What issues are important to them and how do their interests intersect with library services? What committees do they serve on? So you're able to deliver the right messages to for that person's interests. So do they serve on an education committee or tourism? And how can you think about sharing about what's happening at your library for their interests? So I also just want to kind of talk about is that there is a sort of it's a unique situation right now in Massachusetts where there's also several bills in the legislative session that are about intellectual freedom, the right to read, and about ebooks. And so this is unique in some ways, and there is a friendly audience for these library concerns in Massachusetts. So thinking about how do we turn this, we love libraries, which we hear from a lot of folks, into action, starting to build that relationship to make that ask later on. So one question often found, oh, great, thank you, Will. Will just timed that so well in the chat. So how do I find my legislator? So there's a tool for that, right? There's on the Mass Legislature website, you can find, you can type in your address as well. Some communities may be served by more than one representative or senator. So it's important, for example, I'm going to use Reading for an example. In Reading, maybe you're served by two representatives, making sure you invite both of those folks to your breakfast. And also just to step back a little bit, sometimes breakfast will be hosted in one, like say, for example, let's say Reading was hosted. Reading would be inviting their neighbors to those breakfasts. So if you see that there's one being held in the next town over or community and you're planning on attending, please reach out to your legislator to tell them that that's happening. It might not be their district, but it's kind of the regional event for your area. I hope that makes sense. If that's not, we can clear that up a little bit as well. And also, if you're like nerdy like me and you would like to look at district maps, those are also available on the legislature website as well. Okay, so I did my prep work. I found the nearest breakfast. I attended, maybe with the chair of my trustees. We had a lovely conversation with our legislators. And I think it's important to, something I always have to challenge myself to step out of my comfort zone, to talk to people I haven't talked to at these events, especially legislators. So they're there to, right, to talk to you, to hear about what's going on. So making a point to spend some time with them at the breakfast, sharing information, as answering any questions they might have. Um, so following up at the breakfast, you want to thank them for attending, of course. Did you take any photos with them? Those are always great to share on social media and tagging the legislator. Everyone loves to promote themselves in some way on social media and show, especially for legislators, it's an example for them to show what they're doing out in the district, who they're meeting with in the community. If the legislator had any questions, follow up with them with additional information, and then watch for any additional announcements and updates and calls to action from MLA. Okay, I think I covered everything. I'm just going to scan my notes for a second. Yes. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Debbie Conrad, who is the chair of the board at MBLC. And she's going to give us a little bit of background about the MBLC agenda this year.
Right. There we go. All right. I think Will is going to put a link to the 2025 MBLC legislative agenda. And I would recommend that you go and you bookmark that link so you can go back and look at it later. As Maura said, my name is Debbie Conrad. I'm the chair this year of the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. For those of you who are new to Massachusetts or new to being a director, the board is composed of 9 residents from across the Commonwealth who've been appointed to serve as commissioners by the governor. While the commissioners have different library backgrounds, either as library professionals, trustees, friends, or members of library foundations, we share a passion for libraries and the vital role they play in society. The board approves MBLC policies, grants, long-range plan, and annual legislative agenda. But our most important responsibility is to advocate for statewide library funding and initiatives. We can lobby on behalf of the MBLC. As state employees, MBLC staff members cannot. We speak to our own legislators as well as decision makers across the state, attend legislative advocacy events, and speak to MBLC partners about their priorities. But of course, we are only 9 people, and we rely on members of the library community to work with us, asking for state funds for our programs. You are attending this session because you are a new director and perhaps new to advocacy. It is critically important, as Maura said, to get to know your legislators and actively advocate for state funding. New directors have asked me if it's legal for them to lobby for funding at the state level, and not only is it perfectly legal, but it is incredibly important. I've been doing this for years, and I can't count the number of times I've heard a state legislator say he or she doesn't hear from the library community about budget needs. Remember, your representatives are laser focused on returning state funds to their constituents and community organizations. This year's legislative agenda asks our state legislators to fund the statewide library programs and services that support the Commonwealth's libraries and make a difference in the lives of all residents. The legislative agenda is developed from input the MBLC receives from our partners and the library community. Our priorities are your priorities. We typically highlight a few of the MBLC line items for higher funding, while the other line items are budgeted at maintenance levels. This year, the fiscal year 2025 legislative agenda focuses on increases for the MBLC administrative line item, 7,091.01, the Massachusetts Center for the Book, 7,095.08, and state aid to public libraries, 7,095.01. So familiarize yourself with the MBLC legislative agenda. If you look at it now, you'll see there are talking points for each one of those increases. It also discusses the legislative initiatives that that are being sponsored by MLA, the ebook funding and the right to read bills. And then reach out to your state representatives, call them, email them, visit them during office hours in your community. You'd be surprised how willing they are to hear you talk about what is important. They tend to be pretty friendly people by and large. Ask your trustees and friends group and community supporters to do the same. Tell them how important it is that the fiscal year 2025 Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioner line items are fully funded, with the emphasis on the impact that those additional funds will have to your community and residents. It's always helpful to tell a story, how you use state aid for programs and improvements, how participating in the Center for the Book's reading challenges and events support literacy efforts. Parenthetically, there was an article in the Boston Globe today about concerns about the level of literacy among young people because of learning loss during the COVID. So this would be a good opportunity for you to talk about how the Center for the Books is filling that need, and how you depend upon the MBLC consultants to help you develop grant ideas, support trustee education, or develop policies. An excellent start to your advocacy is to be able to attend one of the legislative breakfasts taking place across the Commonwealth. I hope to see you at one of these important events. I would like to also point out, Maura gave you a great overview of how these events take place, but Commissioner Kluggish also always mentions that legislators tend to huddle in the back of the room together, chatting when the programs are taking place. So take a few minutes during these events to go back, introduce yourself to your legislator, to the aide, and chat. And you can chat about what's important in terms of the legislative agenda, but just introduce yourself, particularly if you're a new library director. Remember, what you do now does make a difference, and the commissioners thank you for your assistance. And I am done.
Thank you, Commissioner Conrad. I know Will had shown had put the link to the agenda, but I just wanted to show this graphic from the top of our agenda from the website, developed by our incredible communications team at MBLC. I think it's so beautiful and I love it. I love the puzzle pieces. I think libraries were inherently problem solvers, right? We're about connecting people, and I think this graphic on that really illustrates that beautifully, and building a stronger Commonwealth one person at a time. And it's also available as, oh, my background is not going to make it clear, but also as a PDF as well. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's attended this call or is listening to it after. Hello, thank you. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule to learn about this. And just to reiterate what Michelle said earlier and Commissioner Conrad, is that our legislators really truly appreciate meeting and speaking with you and their strength in numbers. So collectively, all of our voices talking about the issues that are important to libraries do make a big difference. This is the end of our presentation, but I'm sure folks have questions, so we'll be happy to answer any questions that folks may have. I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see, Will, have you gotten any questions in chat or?
Hi, this is Anna Fognolo in the Greenfield Public Library.
Hi.
Hi there. Is it a good idea to make copies of the MBLC's legislative agenda FY 2025 to hand out At our event, we're hosting the Franklin County Legislative Breakfast at the Greenfield Public Library.
And I'll handle that. This is James Lonergan. We're actually going to be bringing those copies. They're being printed. They're supposed to arrive at our office today. So please know we're sending 5 copies to every public library, but we're actually bringing, I believe that Rafavini is on the call on this, and he'll be bringing, oh, he's not, okay. He will be bringing, because he's planning on going to Greenfield, so he'll be bringing plenty of copies. They'll look really nice.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then Brian.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah.
Hi, I just had a question for those that have had successful legislative breakfasts. What's sort of the best strategy in, if you want to host, setting one up? Do you just pick a date and say, you know, can you make it on these dates? I'm sure it's pretty difficult to get them all on the same page. I don't know, what's just sort of the best strategy that's worked for you all?
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I can answer that. Just having done this before I retired, legislators tend to be in district on Fridays.
Okay.
So if you're planning something, it should be on a Friday. Check and see if you can find out if there are other community organizations that are having events on that same day.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to have to be competing with something that's really going to be competition for you. If it's a small group, it's fine, but you don't want to be competing with, say, the Chamber of Commerce if they're having something.
Fair enough.
And then find a good day for you. Make sure you've got parking, make sure you've got food, have it on a Friday, and start sending out invitations.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would just put in a plug for lunches even. And actually, the K has been having a lunch for years, very successful. And then I believe Brockton a few years back even had an evening event. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a very early morning breakfast, just like, you know.
Greenfield is actually having mid-morning breakfast. We don't open until 9:30. But I did want to make a huge suggestion, which we didn't think of until a couple of weeks ago. And sadly, it's not working necessarily in our favor, but our budget is really tight for providing food and drink. So we reached out to a number of local coffee distributors, bakeries, some of the bigger supermarkets to see if anyone would be willing to donate. Our budget is $200 and we are expecting in the region of 100 people. So that's not a lot of money to feed people and have paper goods. We did reach out and a few businesses did come back to us and say, yes, we'd be really happy. And we'll just have like a little, sponsors list of sponsors at the event. But it also brings in your community, which especially our local shops and bakers who have small businesses. So it brings them into the picture as well. So I think it's a win-win on all fronts. But some of the larger, more corporate businesses like the Big Y and Stop and Shop, they require 6 weeks of advance notice if you want sponsorship. And so that didn't work in our favor. We were too close to the date. But my recommendation is if that's something that you need, go for it and make those connections.
Thanks, Anna. And I see there's a great message in the chat too. If you're in the Central Mass region, that CMLA will help cover breakfast expenses up to $150. And they also mention friends groups. And I know, on the South Shore in the past, when we've had legislative breakfasts that might invite legislators from multiple districts, we've tried to reach out to the Friends of the Library in all of those different communities just to see, even if you get $50 or $100 from a handful of different friends groups, that could really help out. Any other questions while we have you? And if not, I'll throw it in the chat again, but legislative@masslib.org is a way to get in touch with the MLA Legislative Committee. And if you have a question, we'll try to answer it. If not, we'll be able to put you in touch with somebody else in MLA or one of the other M organizations, if that's where your question needs to go. Maura, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. No hands raised, nothing else in the chat. So I will turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I really just want to say thank you everyone for attending, and feel free to follow up with any of us on the call. We're happy to answer your questions. And thank you to Michelle and Commissioner Conrad for being here, to James, our director at MBLC, for his feedback as well. And of course, to our legislative committee for all the work that they're doing. Again, there's strength in numbers, so I'll echo Michelle and just putting out a call to help join either MLA or MSLA to help advance those strategic priorities. So have a great day, everyone, and looking forward to connecting with you at a breakfast soon.